Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever podcast on Middle East 24. And you know what? It's happening on the anniversary of the Abraham Accords, the fifth anniversary of these world-changing accords. That as somebody who was born and raised in the Middle East, I know that the Middle East before the Abraham Accords is very different than after. Of course, a lot has happened since, and October 7th was another turning point in our region. But we want to today talk about those major accords and what they have done for people on the ground in the Abraham Accord countries and the impact on the broader region in so many ways that we will discuss. But of course, we will also talk about all of the obstacles that have faced the accords and where we are today and where do we go from here. I want you guys to also follow us and watch everything we are giving you for Middle East 24 on social media. Find us and please follow us on at Middle East _ 24 on X, and that's 2 E's, Middle East _ 24 on X. And then on Instagram, we are at Middle East 1E 24, no underscore, okay, at Middle East 1E, no 20, and no _ 24 on Instagram. Our website is also Middle East 24.org. So let's start this important conversation. With us here are amazing number of people who are coming from different parts of the region. Of course, I'm going to start with my co-founder and co-editor, Dan Pfefferman, who is in Israel today. He will talk about all of his amazing experience. I mean, Dan, you're one of the people who actually worked on the ground, talking to people, engaging with people from the Abraham Accord countries. You've spoken about it. You were part of the creation process in terms of the people-to-people aspect. And I also want to welcome, of course, with us, Dr. Waleed Phares, who is a very important figure from the beginning. He calls it the genesis of the Abraham Accords. Dr. Waleed Phares, of course, is a scholar, a writer, a regular commentator on major American news outlets, and a professor. And you're somebody, Dr. Waleed Phares, I just want to say, you're a treasure in terms of all of the knowledge you have about the Middle East issues, and we would love to discuss with you the genesis of the Abraham Accords and where we are today. And last but not least, we have amazing, incredible young women from the UAE, the country that basically gives women all of the abilities to not only thrive but be leaders in this incredible part of the Middle East. And I, want to kind of salute your efforts in educating and working with so many people. I mean, also being on social media and advising on these issues. I want to welcome with me Mozah Al-Kindi. Is that correct? The way I pronounce your last name? Thank you so much for joining us, Mozah. You are basically studying also politics and philosophy, and you've been doing your own kind of social media activism to educate people about our region, about this part of the world, about the Abraham Accords, which is really important today. And I also want to join with us Aaesha. I want to pronounce your last name correctly. Al-Shihari?
Al-Shahyari.
Al-Shihari, I love it. And Aaesha, you're also basically focusing on educating people about the UAE. I love the Abrahamic family house. You are from Abu Dhabi, and you've been talking about the Abrahamic family house. What does it represent for our, region where we really need this coexistence between the Abrahamic religions, and the Abrahamic family house is a symbol, is a major symbol for this coexistence and new page of relationships between our people, in this incredible and rich Middle East, North Africa region. So let's start the conversation. I would love to start with Dr. Waleed Phares about the genesis of the Abraham Accords. Let's start with the genesis. How did it begin?
Oh, my dear, there are multiple genesis to the Abraham Accord, and I'm sure as the conversation will develop, the role of many people within the United States, those who are surrounding Donald Trump, of course, President Donald Trump, have their own history in it. There's also the history of those who worked seeking the establishment of an Abraham Accord, even without the name, before the name was created, and namely from the UAE, from Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, obviously Morocco and others. But there were forces inside Egypt, inside Jordan, who also tried to push for it. So it's like a pyramid coming together. And then it closed with the declaration, with the signing of the Abraham Accord in the summer of 2020. I would like to take from my memoirs maybe 1 minute to share with you some of the things I've seen, I've spoken with, and the conversations. I will cite conversations I had with players who became later the Abraham Accord. I After 9/11.
And Dr. Phares, you were doing this from inside the administration, is that correct? From
No,
inside
no,
the
this
Trump
is
administration.
not inside. Before there is the pre discussions that the Trump administration has, and then there was a discussion within the Trump administration. That's why I call it Genesis.
The Genesis.
But it started much longer, like yourself, for example, or others have worked on the idea without knowing that this is going to end up in an Abraham Accord. You needed a Donald Trump to actually do it, because we efforted under 8 years of the Obama administration. Did not work. And before that, we worked under the Bush administration. Some of the aspects works and others didn't. So in a very quick way, it was really starting after 9/11, when the US Congress asked a number of scholars to start working on the root causes of terrorism. And we discovered that you have to have a partnership between Israel on the one hand and a number of Arab moderate governments. But beyond that, we realized that you need to have a civil society prepared for it, because the real battle, as we all know here, from Arab, Israeli, Middle Eastern backgrounds, that it's not about contracts that you're going to achieve. You can achieve them elsewhere. It's about a conviction within civil society that Abraham Accord is an accord that demonstrates the level of wanting to make peace. That's how I explained it. So we had this whole conversation with the Saudis, Egyptians, Bahraini, many Arab countries, and obviously in Congress, the conversation with Israel is the easiest because there is a consensus on supporting Israel. It only became reality when the Trump campaign actually asked their advisors, and I was the first named one, but there are others also very valuable people, when they speak with Arab missions or Middle Eastern missions, to raise the possibility, what do you think about having peace with Israel? That was one of the 5-6 questions. And obviously, Israel was ready for peace since 1948, I would say. So that was not the question for them. It was a question for the rest of the Middle East. And here was my opportunity to be able to speak as an advisor to the presidential candidate with the Saudis. As a matter of fact, it wasn't the UAE. The beginning was with the Saudis, who were very interested in knowing what is going to happen in a future Trump policy. So 2 ministers of Saudi Arabia I met in New York and in Washington later. I had the longest conversation, which I related to the people who actually engineered the Abraham Accord, including Jared Kushner and others. But the most impactful meeting I had, even before they come to Washington, was in Abu Dhabi with the leadership of the UAE. It was an unbelievable revelation for me. I knew that the UAE, since 2014, have issued the longest list of terrorist organizations and jihadi organizations. I was surprised that I have never seen this. And I indicated to the campaign, I indicated to Congress that I think, guys, you have a real partner coming. These were parts of the early stage. And of course, there were discussions within the campaign, which transferred to the administration. So I wanted to share this because that will be in my memoirs. And one day I'll come back and discuss with you my future book.
No, that's absolutely fascinating. And I didn't, we know the contacts went back, but it's interesting to hear the actual nuts and bolts of the discussions. And I knew that the UAE was making efforts as far as tolerance promotion going back, solid 10 years before the Accords, but also it's the flip side of it, right? You have to have the carrots, but you have to have the sticks as well. And that's cracking down on Islamist organizations and terror organizations is an absolute critical part. So that's really, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. If I add one point, what drew my attention with the UAE leaders, of course, the foreign minister had long conversations. I had a very brief moment with the president now of the UAE, is that they were not going to Abraham Accord just because of the commercial and trade relations. That, they were going to form a front in the Middle East of nation societies and governments pushing back against jihadism, pushing back against all these ideologies that obstruct peace, that obstruct. So it was deep. It was not something that, yeah, we're going to have a relationship with the Trump administration. We want to have a new Middle East. That's what they meant.
Wow. And I actually, this is the first time I hear that it went back all the way to after September 11th.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. Exactly. And there were three congresses that prepared this. All of them are allies to Israel, but they were wondering who can help us build bridges. So we established, of course, we don't need to do a lot of effort. The Israelis were all over Washington anyway, talking about that. How can you help us, etc., in reaching out. But the really the luminaries were, by order of history, some parts of Egyptian think tanks and members of their parliament. And then, of course, Jordan played a role, but the biggest muscle was the UAE, and of course, with them the South later.
I'm really surprised to hear that Egypt and Jordan are there. And I can tell you, first of all, you're absolutely right. Here in Israel, we don't often understand the region correctly, certainly historically, but that desire to really do almost anything to have peace with the countries of the region has been there since well before the establishment of the state. You're right. It's not just an idea for commercial deals. Something I unpacked it. We had a 5-year to the Abraham Accords and anniversary conference here in Israel yesterday, and I was fortunate to speak on the regional aspects of it. And something that always struck me from the beginning here is that you had a lot of people. I know it's been a lot of time in the States on TV. Meeting with people, especially in the US, and they would be very dismissive of the Accords, as if it's just an arms deal, or Kushner was trying to make a buck, right, on real estate deals afterwards, because there's going to be hotels, or economic deals, or even a defense pact against Iran, let's say, and against the radical axis. And I said, all of those are true, right? But two things can be true at once. It doesn't mean, if A is correct, it doesn't mean B and C are wrong as well. And something that really struck me on my first trip, so, I mentioned I had the very good pleasure from almost the beginning of the Accords, even before Israelis were going there. I have, a dual passport holder. I'm an American, so I got there first. In conversation after conversation, museum after museum, something really struck me here, that there's a deep change happening in the Arab world, and anyone who's been to the UAE can attest to this, that it's easily 30, 50 years in the future, right, on everything.
Oh yeah,
right, and politically also. I think there's a lot of on bureaucracy, on politics, on administration, and you get a sense that. And I'd love to hear from Mozah and from Aaesha, your take on this, and tell me how wrong you think I am, or maybe how right you think I am. There's this sense in the Arab world, and again, and I think the UAE is really leading here. I think the Saudis are close behind, and the rest of the Arab world will follow. Morocco, I think, is a very different context, and we can get to that later. But a sense that the idea of peace with Israel is certainly not for the sake of Israel. I mean, that's nice to have, but I think there's an understanding that the Israeli issue is being used as this distracting demon in the region in order to radicalize regionally, in order to distract, in order to radicalize within the different Arab countries by the radical axis. And so I think, my reading was always that the Arab leaders, the smart ones, those who are willing to say it out loud and those who are not yet willing to say it out loud, they're all saying it behind closed doors, is that we need to put aside this Israeli-Palestinian conflict and welcome Israel, because it's being utilized cynically by the radicals in the region, led by the Iranian axis and by the Muslim Brotherhood axis, to radicalize within their own populations. And so if they want to advance as societies, they need to put that aside and look to the future and not to the past. And ladies, Mozah, Aaesha, I'd be glad to hear, does that resonate with you? This kind of, one of the things that struck me when I went to the palace in Abu Dhabi, is this sort of kind of glorification of these golden ages of Islam, right? And I know I'm a student of Muslim history and Middle Eastern history, and something that we can say is always true about any culture and any civilization is that the golden ages of a civilization are when they embrace multiculturalism, pluralism, and they allow minorities to thrive and be included within. And certainly we know the golden ages of Islam, whether it's in Baghdad or whether it's in Muslim Spain, were when certainly the Jews and at different times Christians and others were accepted and welcomed and empowered in that society. Is that a sense that you get from being Emirati, from living your lives as Emiratis?
I would say in the UAE, the culture was always tolerant and welcoming of all people and all religions. And that started like from the beginning, even before we had the unity of the country. And but it progressed, and we took our steps. And since we spoke about 9/11, I do remember when 9/11 happened, it shook the whole world, right? And in the UAE, there was this shock as well, because the leadership in the UAE, they realized that when they were discussing what happened in 9/11 because of all the hijackers, and they were discussing it with other leaders in the region, they realized that the other leaders in the region are still delusional, and they still want to blame what happened of 9/11 on other parties.
Yeah.
So there was this sense of realization that, okay, it's like we are almost the only ones who are aware in the region, and we need to do some steps. And at that time, Sheikh Zayed insisted that the UAE army shall go with the US army in Afghanistan. And I remember in an interview with Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed with New York Times, he mentioned that. He mentioned that story. And there was this conversation between him and Sheikh Zayed about why the UAE army is going to the US. Are we going there for the sake of Bush? Are we doing this for him? And Sheikh Zayed basically said it's not for him as a president, although the respect is there. We're going there because this is basically the right thing to do. And this is something that also Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed believes in, and all the other leaders in the UAE believe in. We have a responsibility to tackle that issue of terrorism, because when you think about it, I mean, I read somewhere that most of the terrorist organizations in the world, around 37 of them, they are originated from this region, and they are originated from radical Islamism. So we have an issue. And Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed also said that it's not the responsibility of the Americans or anyone else to tackle this issue. This is an issue that only Muslims can tackle and solve. So after 9/11, a lot of changes have been happening in the UAE. There were changes in the education system. We realized we had the Muslim Brotherhood working freely in the UAE, but then we needed to stop them step by step. And then the other thing that struck the UAE and the whole Arab world was the Arab Spring. And the UAE was very ready for it. The others were still delusional, like when 9/11 happened. So all of this led to
So what was happening in the UAE during the Arab Spring? We saw what was happening in other parts of the region. What was happening in your corner of the region?
We knew it will happen to us as well if we didn't move, if we didn't do anything. And at that time, there were some cells in the UAE, and they were waiting actually for their chance to do something within the country internally. But measures we've been taking there at that time. So we do things swiftly. We do things in a way that doesn't shock the society. And for the leadership, they were trying their best to communicate and to have a conversation, a civil conversation with these cells and with the Muslim Brotherhood people who were in the country at that time. So we know our responsibility in this, and that's why a lot of changes happened in the society, in education, in media. Then we had the Ministry of Tolerance. None of that happened just like that. We realized that in order to have stability and prosperity internally and also in the region, we need to collaborate with everyone. We need to be open with everyone. We need to be able to cooperate with so many players and major players around the world. And we saw the issue with terrorism, and we saw it thriving in other parts of the world, but we were able to tackle them internally and then advise on the other in the region and globally.
Are there other countries in the Gulf, in the region, that are learning from this UAE model? Because something that, you mentioned cracking down, but there's also, whenever you take on a radical ideology and the people who back it, you have to be able to, physically, legally, physically, whatever it is, stop the people who are actually doing the bad things. But then you also have to provide a positive alternative. And so maybe, Aaesha, maybe you can address that. What is we talked about the kind of the cracking down and that, but what is the positive alternative? And, what do you see taking place in the UAE? Can we call it like a very modern, kind of very moderate model of Islam that's being developed or that's being promoted?
Well, as Mozah mentioned, you know, the concept of having a tolerance ministry here in the UAE started from the very basic. Like, we don't differentiate between a person of color, a religion, as well as a nationality. So the culture was already hospitable to all different nationalities. And in case something negative happens towards any nationality, there are rules and regulations. And when the Abrahamic Accords came in, it was not something challenging for the society to understand or to digest, because we're already hospitable, we already accept the other, and we understand that we come from different backgrounds, different religion, different perspectives. And we are open to hear even, because if we did not have this mentality, it will be always rejection. And this is not what we come from. We always accept the other, listen to them, and see what is their perspective. Because most of the time, it could actually be really good for us, for both of us. And I think one of the things that helped is that the leadership has been very smart and very guiding, in a sense of, we are part of this world and we are required to collaborate with other countries, and we are required to work with everyone because we're on one earth. The environmentalist in me is coming out. So we are living on one earth, and we are required to collaborate with everyone because we breathe the same air, we utilize the same water, and we will be exchanging a lot of goods between all countries. So from that, it came where the Abrahamic Accords have helped a lot of communications to happen between different religions and different communities, where it is supportive in here. And we have Bahrain next to us, we have Morocco, and these are countries that we are in a really good relations with them, and they have Jewish descendants and Jewish citizens who are living there. So I think it's still in the infancy stage, yet it is still being accepted. We understand, there's an understanding in the society, and there's welcoming as well. We're not directly rejecting. I think this is where it comes, where the Abrahamic Accords is always being supported, and always in a sense where even the leaders here invite us to go for the Friday prayer in the Abrahamic family house, and for the Christians also to go to the prayers on the weekend and to the Shabbat on the weekend as well. So I think the encouragement and the activities happening in a sense of that location, and the activations happening there, is very encouraging for the mindset of the culture to enjoy and to understand, because we've always been like Mozah mentioned before 9/11, in the era where we're all Arabs, we're all Emiratis, we're all listening or talking in the same language, but now we're having something new where we can communicate with, and it is fairly amazing, and it's something different, and we can understand it, and it's not something far-fetched from the society.
Absolutely. I think like we can definitely talk about all of the incredible things that came out of the Abraham Accords. And of course, the UAE as a country was taking the lead in making this major shift,
Mm.
historic shift happen. Even on the like, we see like on the society level, the level of education, the level of openness, of embracing the other. It's something really, I think, very unique and very beautiful in terms of having an Arab country that does that, kind of on all different aspects of society, government, education, all of the above. And we see how it's actually a very bright example in the region. But I do also want to say that, like, we are seeing a shift in the Arab perspective in general, and that is just growing in a sense. Because I speak Arabic, I also post in Arabic. I hear and see all of the comments from people. There's literally a sense that they're behind the countries that are not a part of the Abraham Accords. Now, of course, we know that there's an ongoing war against Hamas, against Hezbollah, the IRGC-backed militias, the nuclear project of the Iranian Islamic Republic. All of these things are still there, but there is a shift on a popular level. And I think if,
Yeah.
Dr. Faris, if you can tell us a little bit more about what you think is happening on the ground, like what were the actual ripples effect of the Abraham Accords on the people's level across the Middle East, North Africa? I don't think there's enough attention to that in the
You're,
media in general.
you're absolutely right. But allow me to make a comment about what the sisters from the UAE have just said. And every time I sit with people from the UAE, and the younger the better, because that's the future, I feel that one of the two forces in the Arab Muslim world, is winning already. It doesn't have to be in 6 months. It doesn't have to be when the next government will come. But when this youth coming out of these universities under that leadership connects with the other youth of other countries, you see a cone moving forward. And it's because of the foundations of the leadership of the UAE. And let me just give one more testimony, and then I'll answer your question, which is, and people could be surprised in my lectures, they ask me about it. The movement in the UAE for peace, right down, precedes the formation of the UAE. It's even that old, that deep. This dynasty, this
How
group.
is that? Tell us about that.
I heard 6 hours from Sheikh Abdullah, and I hope that leaders from other countries, instead of just limiting their conversations to, yeah, we're going to have a deal, they should ask the leadership of the UAE, and that should be programmed in our universities. Why are you different? What happened? It looks like, to summarize it, in the early 20th century, that group of Arabs from the Gulf, especially where the UAE is right now, and that dynasty in particular, have already opened an educational institution, have already opened up even with American educational institution, and the product was a new elite. That's why the UAE is so different. But let me say, as a country, when it was formed, it already had that policy. But many groups around the Arab world, and the ladies, the sisters, realized that, from Morocco, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, the old bourgeoisie, the urban elite, yourself are a product of that. Israel obviously has always had it. Then it all culminated in the Abraham Accord. Now, the Abraham Accord basically is the point of encounter of all these forces coming together. So every force towards the progress, towards the future, other than the UAE and Israel, because these two countries have actually worked on a post-Abraham Accord. See, the agreements that they were signed between Abu Dhabi and Israel were so advanced. But we have to be careful, because the forces that are against the agreement, the jihadists that you have named them, from the Khomeinis in Iran to the Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, and I don't want to talk about Syria, but we are all aware that these forces do not want advancement. Because if there is an advancement, the Middle East, as MBS has said, will become actually what? Will become Europe. While Europe is descending into the jihadi chaos as we see right now, the Middle East Abraham Accord will help the Middle East move forward with the center of Israel, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. And I look at Egypt as very hopeful for the future despite the Muslim Brotherhood. I wish we had all the
It's
time.
ironic, isn't it, Dr. Waleed, that
It is totally
I
ironic.
always say we in the Middle East are starting to figure things out and cracking down on radicalism, and in Europe and in America even they're becoming descending more and more into chaos and radicalism.
Because they love money, dineros. There was a huge article today. I don't want to name countries now because it's very sensitive. Close to $100 billion was transferred from that country and the Ikhwan who surround them into our universities. You know that. Into our university. The battle is an academic battle. The battle is of intellect. And the UAE was the first Arab Muslim country that liberated itself from the jihadi ideology. That's where the credit should go.
It did. There's $100 billion that went into academia. It's funny. I've been talking a lot with Jewish leaders in the United States, very senior Jewish leaders and philanthropists, and I told them this country, right, not so far from our friends here, and its backers in Moscow and others. They buy the
we're talking about. Let's just make it clear: the country that harbors and sponsors the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah,
that's right.
Keep going.
And Al Jazeera.
And Al Jazeera. Okay, a video is coming about that. A video is coming.
Yes. So I told these Jewish donors, you're pouring billions of dollars into putting your names on buildings on every university, but you're not looking at the curriculum. And other actors are coming in and buying the curriculum. They're buying the professors. They're buying the academic chairs. And so it's no wonder that 20, 30 years later now, you have through what I call the Al Jazeera pipeline on the one hand, and it's 20 other, Islamist radical or Russia or China-backed media, that you have that on the one hand, you have a very corrupt, we'll call it a human rights, organizations ecosystem on the other hand, and then you have the academia that's been co-opted and corrupted decades ago already. And so it's no wonder that you have so many people saying the kinds of things they're saying, showing that they are embarrassed to be American or British or French or whatever it is, and cheering for people who literally want to take down Western civilization. It's really shocking to believe, but if you actually, like you said, if you track the money and if you track the history of it, it's not surprising. It's just a very slow, sophisticated campaign, an intellectual dominance campaign. That's exactly what it is.
Dan, if you allow me, I want to actually ask you, because it's really important when we talk about the Abraham Accords to talk about Israel and what's going on in Israel today. So, of course, this is, everything you guys are listening to right now. It's Middle East 24 Breakdown. This is our first podcast. Check us out on all of our social media platforms and our website, MiddleEast24.org. Dan Pfefferman, I wanted to ask you, because we were just talking about the Abraham Accords and basically the impact of the Abraham Accords that is world changing. I believe is on the Middle East, North Africa, but also beyond, around the world. It is a world-changing accords, and my hope personally is for that these accords and any types of peace agreements that are alike, the Abraham Accords that are realistic, that are actually creating this kind of connection and cooperation between Israel and different Arab countries, between the Jewish people and Muslims and Christians and all minority groups. People across the world should, have that ability to cooperate, the good people, let's say, across the world, right? Not away from all of the jihadists, all of these other ideologies.
I term it heavy builders and destroyers. That's how I see it.
I agree.
We need to build we're a coalition of builders. And I always joke, because if you go to the UAE or Tel Aviv, you see construction cranes everywhere. And so we're actually building, but it's society building versus society destruction. Yes.
100%. And, Israel, for me, my own impression, being born and raised in Damascus, Syria, hearing all the hate, the basically indoctrination of the hate towards the Jewish people, towards Israel, celebrating the murder of innocent people because they're Israelis, because they're Jewish. This is something I witnessed personally in a country like Syria. But when I visited Israel, I saw how literally everybody I met said they want peace. Everybody that I met was really happy to meet me and was really friendly and helpful and really excited, knowing that I was born and raised in Damascus, Syria. So we know that the Abraham Accords were something that is probably a dream for many people in Israel, because people in Israel are raised to be, and educated to wanting peace, with Arabs. But at the same time, October 7th happened. And now we have the war that is continuing against Hamas in Gaza. Tell me about the situation in Israel today. How do people feel in Israel about the Abraham Accords, and how
Sure.
hopeful are the people towards hopefully the expansion, but also like about the realities today, giving everything?
Yeah. No, it's a lot to unpack right now. I'll take you back a few years. So I had the fortune to be on kind of the forefront, as you said, of the people to people things, and I agree with you. I think it's absolutely a watershed moment. I'll paraphrase the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, and he said it's akin to the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I'll call this the fall of an ideological Berlin Wall in the region. That the idea of Israel, if anyone ever comes to Israel, and Mozah, Aaesha, I'd be glad to be honored to be your first host here, if you're ever able to come visit. Um, and you'll realize Israelis are nice, some aren't. You'll realize we're a normal country. You realize we're very Levantine country. Dr. Waleed, have you been to Israel before?
Oh, many times.
Many times. It's a very Middle Eastern country. It's a very Mediterranean country. You'll feel that it's very similar to Greece or Turkey or Lebanon, or I haven't been to Egypt, but I've been to Morocco. I felt very much at home in all of these countries, from Italy, from a culture, from even the way people look in the streets, and you realize the thing that people are fighting with, right? What is it that the Pan-Arabists, the Nasserites, and then of course the Islamist idea, and today the radical left, the neo-Marxist, what is it that they have? They've created this image, this symbol of Israel as this symbol of everything that is wrong and corrupt and needs to be defeated in the world. And at the same time, you do have another axis that is seeing everything that is good and positive in the world is connected to Israel, right? The problem is Israel's a normal country with normal people and normal problems, and it's a lot of symbolism to be put on our backs. Prior to the Accords, I can tell you this. First of all, what people don't realize about Israel is that more than half of us, our families, whether first, second, third generation, came from the Middle East. In our culture, in our DNA, in our food, in our music, in the way we talk, in the way we interact, we are Middle Eastern. My grandparents came from Iraq, and Iraqi Arabic, Judeo-Iraqi Arabic, which is apparently different than modern Iraqi Arabic, is something that was normal to my ears. The Iraqi foods, the Iraqi music, etc. So the region is not foreign to us. Unfortunately, because we were boycotted, because we were cut off from the region for so long, we didn't really have a chance to interact with people around the region. And our interactions, I'll say, people also don't realize 20% of Israel, and I'm talking Israeli citizens, are Arab, primarily Muslim, with a strong Christian and Druze minorities. And we see each other day to day. It's very common in all parts of Israel to see women in hijabs and to hear Arabic. And if you go into certain major Israeli cities, you'll hear the Adhan, you'll hear the call to prayer multiple times a day. It's completely normal for us. At the same time, you have 7, 8, even more, even before the foundation of the state, decades of terrorism from the Palestinians. Coming out of what the world calls the West Bank and coming out of Gaza. We've had multiple wars, and now you've had 2 years of a really horrific war followed by, I don't think people in the region understand how traumatic October 7th for us, because I know this because I don't think October 7th and what happened was really broadcast. And ladies, I'd be glad to be either corrected or affirmed by what I'm saying. It wasn't broadcast in the Arab world. People really did not see the atrocities and the pain and the trauma that we felt. on October 7th, when we were really minding our business. There was nothing happening. There was no war. There was no occupation of Gaza. There were Gazans coming into work every day. There was quite the opposite of an occupation of Gaza. And prior to that, I had to spend a lot of time kind of convincing Israeli society with the different groups that I hosted and the media events we did and the kind of introducing influencers to influencers that I'll paraphrase this kind of tongue in cheek, right? I'm being, in joke. Not all Arabs are bad, right? That's because the mindset that developed in the mindset of Israelis is they're all terrorists. Anything Islamic is evil and conquering, etc. And we will have to forever fight them. And we have to show, actually, there's a lot of people from the UAE and from Bahrain and next from Saudi and from Morocco and other places who are genuinely peaceful, who are genuinely modern, and who want to come to get to know us. And the Abraham Accords kind of open that up. Comes October 7th. Listen, tensions are very high here. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. People are suspicious. People are mad. People are angry. There are 100,000 soldiers in Gaza, with soldiers getting killed every day. There's still, we're now 2 years, in 2 weeks now, we're going to commemorate 2 years to October 7th. There are still 20 living hostages in Gaza. And, it's a war that we really didn't want. And we can have this conversation, and we know the people in this room, and nobody else is listening, right? It's just us talking here. So,
Mhm.
so we know what happens behind the scenes. We know what the leadership in Abu Dhabi and Riyadh and Manama and Rabat and probably even in Cairo and Amman are thinking and saying. But what you see in the news and what you see in the protests and what you see in social media is just an absolute den of poison against Israel in the most vile, harsh, anti-Semitism that would have made the Nazis proud, that you see online. And we in this room probably know that a lot of it is fake. A lot of it is driven by paid trolls and paid agitators, whose at least their incomes are probably, again, coming from places not so far from where our guests are sitting. But what you see online, if you're a simple everyday person, is this just venom day and night. And you don't see, so there's Mozah and Aaesha and another 5 friends. There's not an equal sized army of positivity and calling for peace and coming back out. And so this Israelis right now are kind of in a bunker down mode, and it's going to take time, not just for Israel to re-earn the trust of the region, but for the region to re-earn the trust of Israel.
Wow. Yeah. It's a very tough reality, but it's important for people to realize, like, we are, in a time where I believe that the Abraham Accords proven to be resilient, but it's not one of the, obviously, it's still a lot is going on. A lot needs to be healed. And but we need to hold on to them. I think that we know that this is a very difficult moment. I think in history, we know that there are still around 50 Israeli hostages, I believe, right, Dan? I can't
We
hear
know
you.
we think 20 are alive,
Oh, 20 are alive.
and another, the bodies of another roughly 30.
Okay. And the situation in Gaza is difficult. For the people in Gaza, Hamas is weakened, but it's still there. And the war is ongoing for all of these reasons. But at the same time, what happened with the Abraham Accords is that they were accords that were built on the realization that the only way forward is for Israel and the Arab neighbors, specifically moderate advanced Arab countries, to work together and to build a better future for the entire region and for their own people, of course. But Dr. Waleed Phares, I wanted to ask you, and I'm going to go back to Mozah and Aaesha to ask you about the youth, what's basically happening in terms of the conversations. I talked a little bit about the social media world and what I've been seeing from Arabic speakers and from the young people in different countries. But of course, I would love to hear your perspective on the youth today in the UAE and how you're sensing the kind of the response to the accords and to the idea of that This coexistence is our future, is the only way forward. But Dr. Fares, I wanted to ask you about what's happening in the US today in terms of, like, we saw that there was a conversation between Jared Kushner, Minister Dermer with the Trump's administration. I think they met with President Trump. Was there something presented? I mean, tell us a little bit more about this conversation, because, there is an interest in the Trump administration to continue and to expand the Abraham Accords. First, do you think that the Accords proven to be resilient? We know that the numbers of trade agreements, businesses are in the billions between Israel and the UAE, of course, Israel and Morocco and Bahrain, all of that. The numbers are there. They are, expanding. They're growing. But at the same time, we know of the difficulties. But where are we today? And what do you think the future holds for the Abraham Accords?
Okay, in a nutshell, first of all, the Trump administration looks at the Abraham Accord as a core of its future foreign policy in the Middle East. Now, of course, it has the administration has multiple tracks. One is a special track with the Gulf countries. We saw that President Trump went there and then got a lot of business, investment from Saudi, from Qatar. But the largest one, although UAE is much smaller than the UAE, than Saudi Arabia, it was from the UAE. So we can still see that the UAE, even on the level of financial commitment, I mean, I don't understand these numbers that go to $1.4 trillion. I don't know how to count that. So it's immense. And we count on a lot of that investment to eventually become not just commercial, but also social, educational. I mean, if the UAE, I'm being very honest and direct here, want to compete with that other country in terms of spreading the culture of pluralism, of freedom, of peace, it could beat it very easily. But we need to be two to tango, meaning the United States Congress and the administration, the UAE, and of course Saudi Arabia is very important because it's moving on the issue of reform. It's not very visible, but we who knew the Saudi old Wahhabi Ikhwani approach, which was, taken apart by MBS, there is a lot of hope going on. So the US is moving as if the Abraham Accord is here to stay. The UAE is doing the same. And the countries who already have signed off on the agreement are following the UAE, and everybody's looking at Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia can move it to the right, to the left, up or down. And I'm examining the internal debate in Saudi, which is very difficult for people to understand because it's not public. And I am convinced 100% that Mohammed bin Salman is serious about the reforms in the country. Is serious about not just developing the Northwest and all the good, wonderful parts of the Saudi Arabian kingdom that I would like to see, but he is now working on the education. He's catching up with the UAE. The UAE did it first, and then Egypt tried to do it. I met with the Mufti of Egypt a few years ago. Al-Azhar, Sheikh Al-Azhar, yeah. Oh. It's online. I even posted it there. Uh-huh. Even Al-Azhar, who's criticized by many that he's not going strongly against the ideology, they have their own means. Remember what all of us in America, Europe, and the free Middle East are facing is a huge Ikhwan network that is backed by billions and trillions of dollars, connected to, on the other side of the Persian Gulf, with the Khomeinis and with their money, with $150 billion. So my view is that if this phase where Israel...
How do we connect to that money as well for Middle East?
That's a great question, but to finish on the ground, to answer it, it all goes down to if and when Israel will finish off Hamas and Gaza. I said it. I'm not wearing gloves here. It's a 20 kilometers passage that would change the whole thing in the Middle East. Why? It's not that Israel can and will. It's who will come after.
That's the big question, right? That's the
big question. I mean, who will? There is no more Hamas. Unfortunately, some of these radical forces are putting pressure on the EU, even on us here in America and elsewhere, to stop Israel from finishing what will begin peace.
That's what they've done since day one. Is they put pressure through the Europeans and through the campuses and in electorates in different Western countries to stop Israel from finishing off
Yeah.
Hamas and to be able to keep them in power, and the European
Yeah.
countries. And unfortunately, I hate to make this political because it should not be a political thing, but places that have more kind of progressive governments or leaders are prone to this messaging. And that day after thing really is the key to ending this, because Israel can't get out until it knows that there's a proper bridge
Yes.
solution of a day after.
That's the secret. That's the code. If somebody asks me or us, I think Dan just answered. It all depends on the dismantling of Hamas. Why? Because the day after, I can give you projections. The UAE and Saudi Arabia and Egypt and others will be the first to go in and help in reforming. Gaza will never revert to become what it was before. Gaza would tend to become like Dubai. I mean, if you go on social media, say it.
Can Gaza, when Israel left Gaza in 2005, the dream was that the Gazans now have this strip of territory. It's really the most beautiful coastline area of the Mediterranean.
That's true.
And we said, go become Dubai. That's literally what the Israeli public said.
But we spoke to whom? To Hamas, not to a new alternative Palestinian youth reform group and come. Now there is no choice. Once Hamas is dismantled, there is no choice but the moderates among the Arab world. And I would say UAE should be head in reforming education in Gaza. They have people. They have a lot of Palestinians who are ready for that. There is a huge diaspora. Not everybody is Hamas. Not everybody is Abbas. There are plenty of Palestinians who would go, but you need that to be covered by the Arab coalition, by the United States, and by Israel. That collaboration can move the region from that point on everywhere.
Is that being discussed in the UAE? Mozah, Aaesha? What is the discussion on this in UAE think tank circles, in UAE kind of public intellectual discussion, let's call it?
Well, the UAE gave some statements about what could happen in Gaza after the war, and they Lana Nusayba was the one who was vocal about it, and they already published it. So they don't want Hamas to be there, and they want a new reformed government that represents Palestinians, not the current one. So they are vocal about it, but then we are realistic that it cannot happen without the US.
Yeah.
US is playing a major role here. And then realistically, even when I reflect about it, for a Palestinian state, whether in Gaza or in the whole Palestinian areas to be created, there has to be an agreement with the US and Israel. These are the two main majors. If these two main majors with a Palestinian authority or a Palestinian state have agreed on things, I don't think the UAE or any other party will say no to this. This is what the UAE has been calling, and every logical leadership would call for. And I would just want to say something as well. When you spoke about October 7th, you said something that is similar to what I've written in my book. I released a book recently. It's my first. And
Congratulations.
What's the title?
Unexpired, and it's reflections with no expiry dates. So I discussed so many ideas in one. In the first chapter, I'm talking about politics, and I'm reflecting on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, actually. And I've mentioned that the world, and especially in the Arab world, they don't understand the trauma that the Jewish people went through in the Holocaust. So they don't really understand what happened on October 7th. And as you mentioned, when October 7th happened, what has been shown in most of the media and the social media in the Arab world, it was the war in Gaza. So it immediately was the war in Gaza. Even after 1 year, of October 7, I went through and checked what is written in media, Arab media, social media, And it was also the war in Gaza. They don't mention what happened on October 7th. They just focus on that Israel just attacked Gaza. They don't mention the actual thing that happened on October 7th that erupted this war that is still going on. So, and you've all mentioned, even you, Hayvi, that for the Israeli population, that generally it is peaceful and it wants peace with Arabs. This is something that I've noticed as well in my interaction and connections on social media with the engagement that happens. I can see clearly, and someone also mentioned it before. In Israel, people are ready for peace. In the Arab world, most of the Arab world, they're not. And here it's about the population, not only about the leaderships. Because the leadership also in some parts of the Arab world, they're not really promoting peace with Israel. Even the ones who have relations with Israel, they are promoting hate towards Jewish people, towards Israel, in their media and in their education. It's still there. Nothing have changed. So that is sad. That is disappointing. But when it comes to the Abraham Accords, for me personally, I am really optimistic because we survived 5 years, and what I see is that with everything that is going on in the region right now, with the war, with all the other challenges and the escalation that is happening, there's no threat towards the Abraham Accords themselves because in the UAE, a commitment towards peace have been made. And I remember our president, when he spoke about the peace of the Abraham Accords, he said that we went there for this peace with conviction. It's something that we chose, we are convinced of, and it is a peace that we believe is beneficial for everyone. And you can see the benefits of it on the UAE, on the region, on Israel, and even on Palestinians with this war. Because of this cooperation between UAE and Israel, we were able to help with the humanitarian aid. And this is what,
Yeah, it's huge.
yeah, it's huge. Our foreign minister, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, he mentioned it during his interview when Trump was visiting the UAE. So he said, like, if without it, without the Abraham Accords, we would not be able and capable to deliver that much aid to Gaza. And this is still going on. So there's no question. I do believe the Abraham Accords are successful, they're working, they're solid. And as I mentioned also last week, with all the escalation that was happening in the region, we had Healy Forum in the UAE. It's an intellectual and political forum that was happening in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi specifically. And some of the main speakers were from Israel. And you had one of the main speakers from AJC, the American Jewish Committee. He was speaking also in the forum. So this is something that I witnessed. I didn't attend this forum because I was out of the country. If I was there, I would be attending for sure. But I've attended other events in the country, like the Tolerance and Civilization Conference, and I saw Israelis, and I saw the interaction between Israelis and Emiratis in the same place, and they were part of the conversation. They were speakers, they were attendees, and this is what the UAE wants, and this was the intention from the beginning for the Abraham Accords. We didn't want an agreement between government to government. We wanted it to be on all levels between people, and this is why this is working. This is why it's gonna become even better and deeper in the future. And this is what is being publicly published and said. You know, the bilateral trade between the UAE
Yeah,
and
$3.5 billion last year. Three and a
yeah,
half billion dollars last year. And if you take software services, SAS, which is harder to measure. I heard the former Israeli ambassador to Abu Dhabi last night. He said probably another $1 billion. So we're
Wow.
talking over 4 billion, maybe $4.5 billion last year within 5 years, and during a war. I mean, that's really
You know
remarkable.
what? I think we should conclude with the talks about the impact that happened on the people and like where we go from here. Dr. Waleed Phares has to leave us in 3 minutes now. So I want to give him just the opportunity to have his kind of a concluding point about where do you see us going next and what is needed right now to just solidify the Abraham Accords. And, Moses mentioned something very important, which is the people to people aspect.
Yeah.
That I think there's still a lot of work that is needed right now to make this on and educate, the public in the Arabic language, but now we know it's also in English, right? About the realities of the Middle East.
Mm.
What do you want to say about these important points, Dr. Wade Faris?
Well, first of all, thank you. This platform is amazing, and I thank you and thank your guests. And hopefully, we'll have more sessions in this direction. And you and the ladies and the professor, you all summarized it clearly. We need to do more of the same and even better. We need to continue with the dialogue and increase and escalate. My vision, at least in this transition that's happening right now, until the Gaza issue is resolved, until the issue with that country there in the region is resolved, but also what's happening in Syria, Lebanon, etc. All of these are the gigantic fights. But I think we need to connect the American public with the Arab Gulf and non-Gulf public, because once the public is involved, it will help the governments find a solution. One project I have in mind, I know it's we could have many projects. At this point in time, everybody is saying America should do something. I heard it from you, from the UAE, from Israel, from us, the NGOs here. We need the administration and Congress to do something like a shot, an intellectual, cultural, diplomatic shot. And that could well be a conference for peace to follow up on the Abraham Accord here in Washington, D.C., because that would signal to the region. I mean, the region can work. All the Arab countries part of the accord will be there. Maybe new, like Syrian, Lebanese, Iraqi, Kurdish, everybody will come. We need the boss here. We need basically America to do something. And that could be done as a big conference in the U.S. Congress, because everybody's hungry there to have an event to push for the Abraham Accord future, because we know the past. It's an excellent past. The current situation is withholding, the walls here, but what we need is the future. What is the next step? So,
And it has to be bipartisan. It has
oh,
to be.
totally
Just like the
bipartisan.
Abraham Accords is bipartisan, by the way.
Yes.
Absolutely. There is no
Yeah.
question about that. So that would be my conclusion. And I hope we can have a setting ourselves to push for it. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr.
Oh
Waleed
my God,
Phares.
Dr. Wade Faris, it's a pleasure to have you as always, and your insights are just remarkable. Thank you
شكرا عزيزتي.
so much
شكرا.
شكرا لك. I actually want to jump to talk to Aaesha about, what's basically happening on the ground. Like Mozah mentioned a lot of really important points about the public, the educational part, the fact that yes, even the media is not really making the shift, the needed shift to educate people more about the realities. What do you believe is happening, first of all, in terms of young generations in the Arabic speaking world? Because, we can connect to each other. We see what's happening in like social media, right? Like I can, and you can see kind of like the same kind of situation, right? Like what people are commenting more, what they're saying more. We're seeing the shift that is happening. But in your opinion, how do you see the impact of the Abraham Accords on younger generations and specifically in the Arabic speaking spaces?
Well, you've talked about a lot of the narrative that has been embedded in our societies, that Israel is seen as the bad guy and the Arabs are the good guys. And I think this narrative is slowly dismantling. And this is what helps a lot of the youth to go to the next step. And this coming generation, I believe they have broader access to information and they have a lot of critical thinking. So when it comes to such topics, they will be thinking, they will be discussing among themselves other than the social media, and they will be sharing their opinions. And from that, they will communicate their own opinion that is good for themselves and for the future. And everyone is so tired from the war, everyone is so tired from seeing the violence, and everyone is mentally is directed to more peace and more um, harmony with other cultures and other nationalities. And I think that it's very beautiful that this amount of knowledge that has been spread all over the internet or the web is being used in a way where it's moving peace forward rather than keeping it at the back. And the narrative is slowly changing, and I think this is something really amazing. And having examples such as the UAE, Morocco, and Bahrain, and other countries who are part of the Abrahamic Accords is just a testimony for those people that things can happen, but it will take time, because the time that we've been embedded with all the negative ideas is very long, and little by little, it will be dismantled, but it will take time. However, we have to stay strong, and the future generation will definitely push for peace, no matter for whatever it takes, because no one wants any more violence, and everyone is tired from violence and wants
Let, let,
peace.
let me ask you something. Something that, I was talking to a friend from a different Arab country recently, a country that I won't say which one. And they said prior to from the Abraham Accords, prior to October 7th, it was difficult but possible to engage in dialogues with Israelis, cooperation, etc., promoting peace. There's a sense, including in some of the countries that either have relations or want to have relations, and I think your country is really an outlier here, and maybe Morocco. I think that Morocco and UAE are really the outliers here, that are not just allowing, and it's crazy that we have to say this, right? Because if you live in certain countries in the region, you're not even allowed to talk to me because you'll be arrested. But not just allowing, but protecting and even promoting. Right, and you guys mentioned this actively, right? Mosey, you mentioned this with the conference, actively promoting this dialogue, because that's really the only way we move forward. And what you see now, and what this friend confided in me, is that anyone who was even involved in kind of dialogue, business, etc., academia, think tanks with Israelis, had to really go undercover. And something that, how do we get this kind of model that you see in the UAE, that you see in Morocco, of not just allowing but actively protecting and encouraging the citizen, business, academia, think tanks, journalists to engage with Israelis? Not, and again, something that we have to get over in this region is two big things, right? You can engage with the Israeli people without endorsing an Israeli government action. And that's something that everyone seems to be able to do with every country in the world. They can't seem to do it with Israel. And second, you can be pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli at the same time. People also don't seem to understand that that's possible. Certainly from an Israeli point of view, it's absolutely possible. How do we get this mindset to other young people around the region? How do we do this? What are you doing in that regards? I know you guys are creating content, positive content, but how do we get this mindset to spread to other parts of the region?
I believe more conversations as well as more research. Encouraging the youth to do more research about the history of the conflicts and who is the current creator of the conflict would spark a lot of ideas where they will be more open to have a discussions with Israelis. And I think having the freedom to break the barrier and have the conversation is a huge thing, because before we have the conversation we know nothing. It's that we're like in the dark, but now once we have a conversation, there's light is being shown at the tunnel that we are walking in, and we have a clarity in it. I believe that what we're doing in the UAE here is having conferences. Even last year, I participated in accessibility conference where my other speaker was from Israel, talking about the efforts that they're doing in Israel. And for me, it was a great step because I'm standing there speaking about people of determination, and he is standing there talking about people of determination, because we're both countries, we're having similar different people, and we're all supporting humanity after all. So having the conversation, facilitating it through different channels is also great, because once you have that space where you can freely speak and have the conversation without going into deep at the beginning to deep conversations, it would help. It would help in a sense of it would help the fact that things will be smoother in the future and collaboration can happen easier.
Absolutely. Before we conclude, I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to give me just like one last message that you would like to say today on the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords. I think this is such a timely, thing and conversation, of course, to be had. But let me know if you would like to add anything to this. Of course, Dan and Mozah, would love to hear from you.
Be careful with me. I will always talk if given the microphone. I'll let the ladies go first.
Yes, because
Well,
we do have to conclude. Yeah.
yeah, for me, I have few articles that I've saved to read, and they are about the anniversary of the 5 years about the Abraham Accords, and I want to read them like either today or by tomorrow. And other than that, today I actually was reading a piece, a research piece about defense and industry in the Gulf, especially in the UAE. And one of the success examples that the writer and the researcher has mentioned was Israel. And the researcher is from the UAE as well. So that's nice. I mean, if I don't know, like 20 years ago, you will not be seeing someone mentioning Israel as a good example, in the Arab world. So a lot of shift has happened. I believe we do have a new Middle East. Um, I know October 7th is difficult for Israel and for Israelis, and but I do see a hope that shows that the new Middle East is there already, and the UAE is showing us a good example of it, and I think others will join. And regarding young people, as Aisha mentioned, the mindset is shifting. I think more people they do understand, they are more aware about the situation, but they are just afraid to speak about it publicly, especially in countries that don't allow it. For us, we do have the privilege to talk. And I hope the others will get to have that privilege one day.
A beautiful
Beautiful.
message. Aisha, do you want to add anything?
Not much, honestly. In any relationship, the first 5 years might be the hardest, and then afterwards, it becomes easier and easier because conversations are happening, because different aspects are entering the realm of that relationship.
That's
And I
true. I'm
think,
married. I can testify to that.
yeah, exactly. So after the 5 years, more progress will be happening. So I think kudos for everyone who's part of the Abrahamic Accords, because we've passed the 5 years, the most critical years, and now we're moving towards something more progressive.
Excellent. My in-laws always told us 7 years is the test of a marriage. If you can make it through the first 7 years, you're good. Look,
Yes.
I was there. I was in discussions with Emiratis from the few months before the accords were signed. I have been probably one of the leading people in Israel in a non-governmental capacity, talking to people from all over the region. I'm also convinced a new region is underway. And part of what we're trying to do here in Middle East 24 is give a voice to that, give a voice to this new region, to this new kind of dialogue, to new honest discussion about things. It's okay to also air out the difficult things. You know, we're gonna air different episodes over the course of the next time period, certainly so long as this war continues. It's going to take time, I think, for people to be able to let down, cool down their emotions about everything that's happening. And I think we need to encourage curiosity, as you said. And I think it's great. People need to research, people need to think, people need to start thinking critically for themselves and asking the right questions. And we need to have as much shining a light, a spotlight on the radicals who are trying to constantly ruin things. I've termed earlier I said builders. All right, I see the Abraham Accords as a coalition of builders. This is Mozah, you wrote your book. This is the next book I want to write. Is called The Builders and Destroyers. And I always viewed from the beginning the Abraham Accords as a coalition of builders. The October 7th attack, which we know was implemented by Hamas, but it was backed at least ideologically and in a sense financially and structurally by the Islamic Republic in Iran, and Hezbollah joined partially. It was supposed to join fully, and we know it was backed ideologically and financially by other actors. I call it a revolt of the destroyers, and these are actors who have no positive vision for the region. I think we mentioned the irony of what's happening in the West versus what's starting to happen in the region. And your country, I think, is one of the leaders of this. We need to keep giving platforms to the positivity. Currently, there really are none. We're trying to be such a platform for these kind of positive, open discussions. We need to shine a light on the radical actors and the kind of things that they're doing to manipulate and to radicalize and to distract. And we need to be as much engines of connectivity and positivity here in the region. This war will end sooner or later. It has to end. It has to end. We said with Hamas defeated and out of power for the sake of the Palestinians, for the sake of us, for the sake of everyone in the region. And I'm very much hopeful for the future of the region because, and it's sparked because of my experiences visiting, the UAE, visiting Bahrain, visiting Morocco. Hopefully, maybe this year I'll get to go to Saudi Arabia, and I believe there's a lot of bright things happening here. And so, thank you for joining us, Mozah. Thank you, Aaesha. Thank you to all our listeners. Hayvi, you want to sign us
Yeah.
off?
I mean, it's just incredible. I love the conversation. I actually feel a lot more hopeful now than in the beginning because, there's just so much going on. And sometimes we forget about all of the progress that's actually happening.
I want to mention, sorry to cut you off. I want to
Yes.
mention a point of progress. You mentioned who would have imagined 20 years ago, right, the kind of cooperation on defense. I'll give you an example. I used to be an IDF officer, and my focus in the IDF was international cooperation. That was my expertise in the army. I worked with different armies. I worked with our allies primarily, and I remember let's just say that the behind the scenes ties with the UAE and with other Arab allies. When was I in the army? Over 10 years ago. I'll tell you what I could never have imagined. Actually, I could have because I was there when the architecture was being put in place. When Iran launched 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, okay? Iran launches 200 ballistic missiles in Israel, and the ballistic missile defense architecture put together by the Americans, our common ally. Israel, by the way, after the Abraham Accords, did something that most people aren't aware of. Israel was moved from European Command, from EUCOM, because the Arab countries used to not want to openly collaborate with Israel, and it was moved to CENTCOM, which is the Central Command, Middle East Command, which means there is now official, proper cooperation and military exercises and intelligence exchange. And you saw the entire American architecture, all the moderates in the region come together in one of the most overlooked but brilliant and impressive feats of military activity, I think, in modern history. And that is to intercept 200 ballistic missiles and drones fired from Iran at Israel, all in a span of a couple hours. And 99% of them were intercepted before they even reached Israeli airspace by this regional coalition, something that I could have only started to imagine 20 years ago because I was in that field, and maybe people outside aren't aware of. And it's really a new era we live in. And I'm hopeful. I'm truly hopeful for what the post-war, I call Abraham Accords 2.0 era is going to bring us.
Amazing. And on this note, I want to remind everybody you guys were listening to and watching Middle East 24 Breakdown. Please watch us and follow us on all social media. We are on X at Middle East underscore 24, two E's, and on Instagram, Middle East 24, but with one E, and our website is middleeast24.org.
And soon
We'll
we'll have
also be
YouTube
on
as well.
YouTube. Yes, we're going to be on YouTube. We'll have the whole podcast as a whole put together, but also you're going to find a lot of clips of this very amazing conversation on our social media. I'm so happy that the Abraham Accords anniversary was actually our first podcast. This is very meaningful. Thank you
It
so
is.
much, Mozah and Aaesha, for joining us today. And we'll look forward. Of course, me and Dan, we're going to have a lot more of these conversations moving forward. So stay tuned. Thank you.